The blood on Beatrice Jordan's fingers never quite washed away completely, no matter how many times she scrubbed them in the basin each night. Not real blood, of course, but the stain of it nonetheless. The deep red dye from the wool she spun day after day in the dusty corner of Albuquerque's only textile shop in the New Mexico Territory of 1878. Her fingers moved constantly, endlessly, pulling and twisting the raw fibers into thread with a mechanical precision that made the other women whisper she had been touched by something unholy, something that would not let her rest. The truth was simpler and sadder than any curse. Beatrice could not stop working because if she did, she would have nothing. No food, no roof, no future beyond the streets that claimed so many young women who found themselves alone in the harsh desert territory. At 22 years old, she had been spinning thread for Mr. Henderson's shop for 7 years, ever since her father died of fever and her mother followed him 6 months later, unable to bear the grief. Her fingers had learned their dance on the spinning wheel before she fully understood what survival meant, and now they knew no other rhythm. The wheel hummed beneath her touch as the afternoon sun slanted through the grimy window, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Dust motes floated in the light, and Beatrice's hands moved, never stopping even as her shoulders screamed for rest and her back ached from hunching over the wheel. Mr. Henderson paid by the spool, and if she wanted to eat more than beans and stale bread this week, she needed to produce 10 more spools before closing time. "You will work yourself to death, girl," old Mrs. Chen said from her station near the back, where she repaired torn garments for the town's wealthier families. The Chinese woman had been kind to Beatrice over the years, slipping her extra food when she could, teaching her words in Cantonese during slow afternoons. "Your hands shake already. Look." Beatrice glanced down and saw it was true. Her fingers trembled as they worked, the joints swollen and red, the nails broken down to the quick. She had wrapped cloth around the worst of the blisters that morning, but the makeshift bandages were stained through now, and she could feel the sting of broken skin with every twist of the fiber. "I am fine," she said, though her voice came out thin and thready. "Just a few more spools." "Always a few more spools with you," Mrs. Chen muttered, but she said nothing else, returning to her needle and thread. The truth was that Beatrice had been feeling strange all week. Light-headed, feverish. She had been coughing at night, deep rattling coughs that shook her narrow bed in the boarding house and made Mrs. Palmer, the landlady, pound on the wall and shout at her to be quiet. Beatrice had ignored it all, because acknowledging sickness meant acknowledging that she might have to stop working, and stopping meant losing everything she had fought so hard to keep. By the time Mr. Henderson finally locked the door that evening, Beatrice had finished 12 spools. Her vision swam as she stood, and she had to grip the edge of the spinning wheel to keep from falling. Mr. Henderson counted out her wages with his usual sour expression, dropping the coins into her palm one at a time as though each caused him physical pain. "Your quality is slipping," he said, peering at her through thick spectacles. "This batch is uneven. I will have to dock your pay." "Please," Beatrice heard herself say, hating the desperation in her voice. "I worked hard today. The thread is good." "It is acceptable," he corrected. "Not good." "There is a difference, Miss Jordan. Perhaps if you focused more on your work and less on whatever daydreaming occupies your mind, your output would improve." She wanted to laugh at that. Daydreaming. As though she had the luxury of dreams anymore. But she bit her tongue and accepted the reduced payment, sliding the meager coins into the pocket of her worn dress. It would be enough for rent and a little food if she was careful. It would have to be. The evening air hit her face as she stepped outside, cooler now that the sun had dropped behind the Sandia Mountains to the east. Albuquerque was not a large town, but it bustled with activity as workers finished their days and headed to the saloons or home to their families. Beatrice walked with her head down, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders despite the lingering warmth. She had learned years ago that invisibility was a kind of armor for a woman alone. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. One moment she was walking, the next she was on her knees in the dirt, the world tilting sideways in a way that made her stomach lurch. She heard voices, distorted and far away, and then strong hands gripped her shoulders. She tried to pull away, panic flooding through her, but the hands held firm. "Easy now," a deep voice said, rough as gravel but somehow gentle. "You are burning up. When did you last eat?" Beatrice forced her eyes to focus and found herself staring up at a man who seemed carved from the mountains themselves. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the fading light. His face was weathered and tanned, half hidden behind a thick beard, but his eyes were a startling pale blue, like chips of sky. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his arms, visible beneath rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle earned through hard labor. "I am fine," she managed to say, the automatic response. "Please let me go." "You are not fine," he said flatly. "You are sick and half-starved unless I miss my guess. Can you stand?" "I do not need your help," she insisted, but even as she spoke, black spots danced across her vision. The man made a sound of frustration in the back of his throat. "Stubborn, I should have known." Before she could protest, he scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, cradling her against his chest. Beatrice gasped, too shocked and weak to fight, and felt the solid warmth of him seep through her thin dress. "Put me down," she said, but it came out as barely a whisper. "Where do you live?" he asked, already walking. His stride was long and sure, and he carried her as though she was precious cargo, his arms steady beneath her. "The boarding house on 3rd Street, she admitted, because what choice did she have? "But I can walk, truly." "You can barely keep your eyes open," he countered. 3rd Street, you said." She nodded weakly, and then surrendered to the strange comfort of being carried. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with kindness, so long since she had felt anything but the endless pull of work and survival. This stranger smelled of pine and leather and wood smoke, and his chest was solid as oak beneath her cheek. She knew she should be afraid, that accepting help from a strange man could lead to things worse than poverty, but exhaustion had worn away her usual defenses. "What is your name?" she asked as he turned onto 3rd Street. "Garrett Jameson," he said. "I trap in the mountains, bring pelts down to trade every few months, and you, Beatrice Jordan." Her tongue felt thick in her mouth. "I work at Henderson's, spinning." "I figured as much." He glanced down at her, and she saw something like pity flicker across his features. "Your fingers are bleeding through the wrappings." She had not even noticed. The pain had become such a constant companion that she no longer registered it as unusual. "They are fine. I am used to it." "Nobody should be used to that," Garrett said, his voice going hard with what might have been anger, though she did not think it was directed at her. They reached the boarding house, a tired structure that leaned slightly to one side, its paint long since scoured away by wind and sand. Mrs. Palmer was on the porch, sweeping with sharp, jerky movements. She looked up as Garrett approached, her eyes narrowing. "What is this?" she demanded. "Beatrice Jordan, if you have gotten yourself into trouble, you are out on the street tonight. I run a respectable house." "She is ill," Garrett said before Beatrice could attempt an explanation. "She collapsed in the street. Where is her room?" Mrs. Palmer's face pinched. "Upstairs, end of the hall, but she is behind on rent already. If she cannot work, she cannot stay." "How much does she owe?" Garrett asked. The landlady named a sum, and Beatrice felt shame wash over her, hot and bitter. It was not a large amount, but it might as well have been a fortune to her. She had been planning to pay it with next week's wages, but if she was too sick to work. Garrett shifted her weight to one arm, an impressive feat of strength that made Beatrice's head spin, and dug into his pocket. He pulled out several coins and handed them to Mrs. Palmer. That should cover this month and next. Now, where did you say her room was? The landlady's attitude changed immediately, her expression smoothing into something approximating friendliness. Top of the stairs, last door on the right. Such a kind man you are, helping the poor girl. Garrett grunted something non-committal and carried Beatrice inside. The stairs creaked under his weight, but he climbed them easily, barely breathing hard despite her burden. Her room was small and sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk that held her few possessions. Garrett laid her down gently on the bed, then looked around the bare space with a frown. "You have food, medicine?" he asked. "I am fine," she said again, the words automatic, meaningless. He gave her a look that suggested he saw right through the lie. "Stay here. Do not try to get up." "I have to work tomorrow," she protested weakly. "You are going to work yourself into the grave if you keep on like this," he said bluntly. "Rest. I will be back." He left before she could argue, his boots heavy on the stairs. Beatrice lay in the growing darkness, shivering despite the warmth of the evening. Her body felt like lead, too heavy to move, and her mind drifted in and out of focus. She thought she should be worried about this stranger, should be planning how to repay him, or at least questioning his motives. But exhaustion dragged her down into a fitful doze. She woke to the sound of her door opening. Garrett entered carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth, which he set on the washstand before lighting the oil lamp on the wall. Warm light flooded the room, and Beatrice blinked against it. "Sit up if you can," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "You need to eat." "I cannot afford," she began. "Did I ask you to pay?" He unwrapped the bundle, revealing bread, cheese, cold meat, and a jar of what looked like soup. "Eat." Beatrice pushed herself upright, her head swimming. Garrett poured water into her basin, then brought her a cup and the food. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what it was to have enough. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and good, the meat tender. The soup, still warm somehow, tasted of chicken and vegetables and herbs she could not name. Garrett watched her eat with his arms crossed over his broad chest, leaning against the wall. "When did you last have a full meal?" he asked. She thought about lying, but something in his steady gaze made her tell the truth. "Sunday. Mrs. Chen brought extra rice from her lunch." "That was 5 days ago. I have been eating," she said defensively. "Bread, some beans." "That is not eating, that is starving slowly." He pushed off the wall and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, the frame creaking under his weight. "Let me see your hands." Beatrice hesitated, then held them out. The cloth wrappings were stained dark with blood and the residue from the dye. Garrett's jaw tightened as he carefully unwound them, revealing the battered skin beneath. Her palms were covered in blisters, some fresh, others broken and weeping. Her fingers were swollen and red, the knuckles cracked and bleeding from the constant friction of the wool. For a long moment, Garrett said nothing. He just stared at her hands, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. Then he took them between his own, his touch so gentle it made her throat tighten. His hands were huge, calloused and scarred from years in the wilderness, but they held hers as though they were made of glass. "These hands deserve gentleness," he said quietly, his voice rough with some emotion she could not name. "Not this, not endless work that tears them apart." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, hot and unexpected. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as though she mattered, as though her pain was worth acknowledging. "I have to work," she said, her voice breaking. "If I do not work, I have nothing." "Everyone has to work to live," Garrett agreed, "but not like this, not until you break." He released one of her hands to reach for the bundle, pulling out a small tin. "This is salve, made from herbs and beeswax. It will help with the pain and the healing." He opened the tin and began applying the salve to her hands with infinite care, his fingers working the ointment into her damaged skin with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his massive frame. The salve was cool and soothing, smelling faintly of mint and something else, something green and wild that reminded her of things beyond the dusty streets of town. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, unable to hold back the question any longer. "You do not know me. I cannot repay you." Garrett glanced up at her, his blue eyes serious. "I do not expect repayment. I saw someone who needed help, so I am helping. That is all." "Men do not help for no reason," she said, old wariness creeping into her voice, his hands stilled on hers. "Some men do not," he acknowledged. "But I am not asking anything of you, Beatrice. I will finish tending your hands, make sure you have enough food to get through the next few days, and then I will leave you in peace. You have my word." She searched his face for signs of deception, for the smirk or the calculating look that usually preceded a man's true intentions, but found only honest concern. It unsettled her, this kindness with no apparent strings attached. In her experience, everything came with a price. But her hands did hurt, and the salve was helping, and she was so tired of being strong all the time. So she nodded and let him finish his work, wrapping her hands in clean cloth he had brought with him. When he was done, he stood and moved to the washstand, washing the salve from his own hands in her basin. "You need to rest," he said, drying his hands on a cloth. "Truly rest, not just sleep a few hours and drag yourself back to work. Your body is fighting a fever, and if you do not give it time to recover, it will only get worse." "Mr. Henderson will dismiss me if I do not come in tomorrow," she said helplessly. "Let him." Garrett's voice was flat. "Any man who works a woman until she bleeds and then threatens to dismiss her when she falls ill is no man worth working for." "I need that job," Beatrice insisted. "It is the only one I have." Garrett turned to face her, and in the lamplight, he looked even larger, a force of nature contained in human form. "There are other jobs, other ways to survive. You are killing yourself for a man who does not care if you live or die, so long as his spools get made." "You do not understand," she said, frustration rising through the fog of fever. "It is not that simple. I have no family, no other skills. Spinning is all I know." "Then learn something else." He said it as though it were obvious, as though the whole world was not arranged to keep women like her exactly where they were, trapped and struggling. "You are smart. You have endured years of this work. You could do anything if given the chance." "Chances are not given to women like me," she said bitterly. Garrett studied her for a long moment. "Maybe not given," he agreed, "but they can be made." Before she could ask what he meant, he gathered up his things and moved toward the door. "I am staying at the hotel on Main Street," he said. "If you need anything, come find me. I will be in town for another week at least, settling accounts and gathering supplies." "Why a week?" she asked. "Because I agreed to guide a hunting party into the mountains," he said. "Rich men from back east who want to shoot elk and pretend they are frontiersmen. It pays well enough to make it worth my time." "That sounds dangerous." He shrugged his massive shoulders. "Life in the mountains is always dangerous. But it is honest danger, not the slow, grinding kind that you face every day in that shop." With that cryptic statement, he opened the door. "Rest, Beatrice," he said, looking back at her one last time. "Let those hands heal. You deserve at least that much." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the stairs. Beatrice sat in the sudden silence, staring at her wrapped hands. They still hurt, but the pain had dulled to something bearable, and beneath the cloth, she could feel the cooling touch of the salve. She lay back on the bed, her mind churning. Garrett Jameson was unlike any man she had ever met. He was rough-spoken and direct, but there was a core of kindness in him that seemed as unshakable as the mountains he called home. And he had looked at her not with pity exactly, but with a recognition that made her feel seen in a way she had not been in years. The fever pulled her down into sleep eventually, and she dreamed of pine forests and clear streams, of hands that held gently instead of demanding endless work, of a life that might exist beyond the spinning wheel. She woke late the next morning to sunlight streaming through her window. Panic seized her immediately. She had missed work. Mr. Henderson would be furious. But when she tried to get out of bed, her body refused to cooperate. The fever had not broken. If anything, she felt worse, her chest tight and her breathing shallow. The day passed in a haze. Mrs. Palmer brought her water at some point, grudgingly, muttering about illness spreading through the house. Beatrice drifted in and out of consciousness, half aware of the sounds of the town outside her window, the shouts and wagon wheels and endless march of life that continued whether she was part of it or not. Evening came, and with it, Garrett Jameson. She heard his heavy tread on the stairs, then a knock at her door. "Beatrice, I am coming in." He entered carrying another bundle of food and a worried expression. "You are worse," he said, crossing to the bed in 2 long strides. He pressed his hand to her forehead, and she felt the blessed coolness of his palm against her burning skin. "You need a doctor." "Cannot afford a doctor," she mumbled. "I can," he said shortly. "Stay here." He left again, and Beatrice wanted to protest, wanted to tell him to stop spending his money on her, but the words would not come. She was so hot, burning up from the inside, and every breath felt like dragging air through wool. Garrett returned with Dr. Morrison, an older man with kind eyes and a perpetually rumpled appearance. The doctor examined her thoroughly, listening to her chest, checking her pulse, looking at her hands with a deepening frown. "Pneumonia," he announced finally. "Not severe yet, but it will be if she does not rest and receive proper care. These hands, though," he looked at Garrett. "This is from work, spinning," Garrett confirmed. "At Henderson's shop," Dr. Morrison sighed. "I have seen this before. He works his employees to the bone, pays them barely enough to survive, and then replaces them when they break down. It is legal, unfortunately, if morally bankrupt." "What does she need?" Garrett asked. "Rest, warmth, good food, and these hands must be kept clean and allowed to heal. I will leave medicine for the pneumonia." He mixed something in a cup, herbs and powders, then helped Beatrice drink it. It tasted bitter, but she forced it down. "She needs someone to look after her for at least a week." "Do you have family, Miss Jordan?" Beatrice shook her head weakly. "I will look after her," Garrett said. Both Beatrice and the doctor looked at him in surprise. "Sir, that is very generous," Dr. Morrison said carefully, "but it may not be proper. People will talk." "Let them talk," Garrett said flatly. "She has no one else, and I am not leaving her to die alone in this room." "I am not dying," Beatrice managed to say. "Not if I can help it," Garrett agreed. "Doctor, send the bill to me at the hotel. What else do I need to know, doctor?" Morrison gave instructions about the medicine, about keeping her warm and hydrated, about watching for signs that the pneumonia was worsening. Garrett listened intently, asking questions, absorbing every detail. When the doctor finally left, Garrett pulled the room's single chair over to the bedside and sat down. "You cannot stay here," Beatrice protested weakly. "Your reputation, mine." "I do not care about reputations," he said. And anyone who would judge a sick woman for accepting help can go straight to hell. Despite everything, she felt a smile tug at her lips. You are very stubborn, so I have been told. He poured her water from the pitcher. Drink this, all of it. She obeyed, too tired to argue. Her hands shook as she held the cup, and Garrett steadied them with his own, that same gentle touch that seemed impossible from someone so large and rough. Why are you doing this? She asked again, needing to understand. You could be at the saloon or preparing for your hunting trip or 100 other things. Why sit here with a stranger? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. I had a sister once, he said finally, his voice low. Rebecca. She was younger than me by 4 years. When our parents died, I tried to take care of her, but I was only 16, did not know the first thing about raising a child. I went into the mountains to trap, thought I could make enough money to give her a good life. Left her with a family in town who promised to look after her. He paused, and Beatrice saw old pain flicker across his face. When I came back 6 months later, she was dead. Worked herself sick in a laundry, just like you are working yourself sick now. She was 14 years old. Garrett, Beatrice breathed, her heart aching for him. I failed her, he continued. I left her alone, and she died because of it. I cannot bring her back, cannot fix what I did wrong. But when I saw you collapse in the street yesterday, saw your hands torn up from work, I knew I could not walk away. Maybe it will not matter in the long run. Maybe you will get better and go right back to killing yourself for Henderson, but at least I will know I tried. Beatrice felt tears slide down her cheeks. I am sorry about your sister. So am I. He wiped her tears away with surprising gentleness. But that is not your burden to carry. You just focus on getting well. Over the next 3 days, Garrett Jameson became a constant presence in Beatrice's small room. He brought her food 3 times a day, good substantial meals that slowly built back her strength. He administered the medicine doctor. Morrison had left, keeping careful track of the doses. He changed the wrappings on her hands, applying fresh salve with that same infinite patience. He brought books from the general store and read to her when she was too weak to hold them herself. His deep voice stumbling occasionally over words but pressing on regardless. And he talked to her. Told her stories of life in the mountains, of tracking animals through snow, of the profound silence that existed above the tree line. He spoke of a cabin he had built with his own hands, of clear streams full of trout, of nights so cold your breath froze in the air and stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. It sounds beautiful, Beatrice said one evening as the fever finally began to break. Her voice was still weak, but her mind was clearing. It is, Garrett agreed. He sat in his usual spot beside the bed, his long legs stretched out in front of him. Lonely, though, I go months sometimes without seeing another person. You prefer it that way? He considered the question. I used to think so. After Rebecca died, I did not want to be around people anymore, did not want to care about anyone, risk failing them the way I failed her. The mountains do not judge you, do not need anything from you except respect. It seemed easier. And now? She asked. His blue eyes met hers, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Now I am not so sure. These past few days, sitting here with you, talking, it has made me remember that people can be more than just disappointments and losses. That sometimes they can be something good. Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with fever. I have enjoyed your company too, she admitted quietly, even though I have been poor company myself, lying here sick. You have been fine company, Garrett said, better than most. You listen when I talk, ask good questions, and you are brave even if you do not see it. Brave, she almost laughed. I am afraid all the time. That is what makes it brave, he countered. Being afraid and doing what you must anyway. You have been on your own for years, surviving in a world that does its best to grind down women like you. That takes courage. No one had ever called her brave before. The words settled into her chest, warm and unfamiliar. "I do not know what I will do when I am well," she confessed. "Mr. Henderson will have dismissed me by now. I will need to find other work." "Have you thought about what I said?" Garrett asked. "About learning something new, I have thought about little else," she admitted, "but I do not know where to start. I have no money for apprenticeship, no connections to help me find a better situation." Garrett leaned forward, his expression serious. "Come with me." The words hung in the air between them. "What?" Beatrice said, certain she had misheard. "Come with me," he repeated. "Back to my cabin in the mountains. You can stay there while you recover fully, figure out what you want to do next. There is a trading post about 10 miles down the valley where you could find work if you wanted. The woman who runs it is always looking for help. Or you could stay at the cabin, learn to do other things. I could teach you to hunt, to fish, to live off the land. It is not an easy life, but it is better than this." Beatrice stared at him, her heart pounding. "You are asking me to go into the wilderness with you?" "A man I have known for less than a week." "I know how it sounds," Garrett said, "but I give you my word on my sister's memory that I would not harm you or force you into anything you did not want. You would have your own space, your own choices. I am just offering you a chance to start over, away from places and people who see you as nothing but a source of labor." "People would definitely talk then," she said, trying to inject some lightness into her voice even as her mind raced. "There would be no people to talk," he pointed out. "That is rather the point of the mountains." She should say no. It was madness to even consider running off with a strange man, no matter how kind he had been. But as she lay there, looking at Garrett's earnest face, feeling the lingering ache in her hands, thinking about returning to Henderson's shop or finding another job exactly like it, the word that came out of her mouth was different. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will go with you." Something shifted in Garrett's expression, a subtle relaxation of tension she had not realized he was holding. "You are certain? You do not have to decide now. Think about it, take your time." "I have had nothing but time lying here," Beatrice said. "Time to think about what my life has been and what it might become. You are offering me a chance, like you said. I would be a fool not to take it." "You are not a fool," Garrett said firmly. "You are one of the smartest women I have met. You must not meet many women up in your mountains." His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "That is true enough, but my point stands." They talked long into the night, making plans. Garrett's hunting trip would take another week, he explained, but after that, he would be free to head back into the high country. That would give Beatrice time to fully recover and gather what few possessions she wanted to bring. He would handle supplies and transportation, refusing her weak protests that she should contribute. "You can contribute once you are well and settled," he said. "For now, let me handle things." By the end of the week, Beatrice was strong enough to walk without dizziness, though Dr. Morrison cautioned her to take things slowly. Her hands were healing too, the blisters beginning to scab over, the swelling reduced. She could move her fingers without wincing, though they were still tender. She went to Henderson's shop one last time, not to work but to collect her final wages. Mr. Henderson greeted her with a scowl. "You have been absent for over a week without notice," he said. "I have already hired your replacement. You are owed nothing." "I was ill," Beatrice said, keeping her voice level with effort. "Dr. Morrison can confirm it. Illness is no excuse for abandoning your post," Henderson snapped. "Now leave my shop before I have you removed." Beatrice felt anger rise in her throat, hot and bitter. 7 years she had worked for this man. 7 years of bleeding fingers and aching shoulders and barely enough pay to survive. "You are a cruel man, Mr. Henderson," she said quietly. and I pity anyone desperate enough to work for you." His face went red. "How dare you speak to me that way? You are just a lazy girl who could not handle honest work." "She handled more honest work than you have ever done in your life," a deep voice said from the doorway. Garrett stood there, filling the frame, his expression thunderous. He crossed the shop in 3 long strides and placed himself between Beatrice and her former employer. "You will pay her what she is owed for the last week she worked," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Every cent." "I will do no such thing," Henderson sputtered. "She abandoned her position." "I owe her nothing." "Then I will take it out of your hide," Garrett said flatly. He took a step forward, and despite being several inches shorter and considerably lighter, Henderson actually stumbled backward. "Pay her. Now." The shop owner's eyes darted around, perhaps looking for help, but Mrs. Chen had retreated to the back room, and there were no customers to witness the confrontation. With shaking hands, Henderson opened his cash box and counted out coins, more than Beatrice had expected. "That is 2 weeks' worth," Garrett said, examining the sum. "She worked here for 7 years, and you are dismissing her for being ill. Give her a severance. 1 month's pay." "That is outrageous," Henderson protested. Garrett just stared at him, immovable as a mountain, and after a long, tense moment, Henderson added more coins to the pile. Beatrice scooped them up quickly, tucking them into the pocket of her dress. "We are done here," Garrett said. He took Beatrice's elbow gently and steered her toward the door. As they left, he called back over his shoulder, "If I hear you have been speaking ill of Miss Jordan around town, I will come back. Remember that." Outside, Beatrice found herself shaking, though whether from anger or relief or simple surprise she could not say. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," Garrett countered. "Men like him only understand force. Words mean nothing. Still, thank you." She looked up at him, this mountain of a man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she had been too tired to speak. "For everything, not just this, but all of it." His expression softened. "You are welcome. Are you ready to leave this place behind?" Beatrice thought of her small room, her few possessions, the town that had never felt like home despite years of living there. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Garrett purchased supplies with the earnings from his hunting trip, filling saddlebags with flour and salt and coffee, and all the things they would need for the journey and the weeks beyond. He bought Beatrice warmer clothes than she owned, a thick coat and sturdy boots and gloves to protect her healing hands. He acquired a gentle mare for her to ride, a dappled gray with intelligent eyes. "Her name is Silver," the stable owner said. "She is good with nervous riders." "I have never ridden a horse before," Beatrice admitted as Garrett helped her into the saddle. "Silver will teach you," he said. "She knows what she is doing, even if you do not. Just hold on and trust her." His own horse was a massive bay gelding named Bear, who looked like he could carry 2 men Garrett's size without strain. Together, the 2 horses and their riders made an odd picture as they set out from Albuquerque early one morning, the sun just beginning to paint the sky pink and gold. Beatrice looked back once at the town, at the dust and the buildings and the life she was leaving behind, and felt no regret. Whatever lay ahead in the mountains could not be worse than the slow, grinding existence she had endured for so long. The journey took 3 days. They traveled north and east, leaving the flat desert around Albuquerque and climbing gradually into foothills covered with piñon and juniper. Garrett set an easy pace, mindful of Beatrice's still recovering strength, and they stopped frequently to rest the horses and eat. He proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to sit properly in the saddle, how to guide Silver with gentle pressure of her knees, how to read the landscape for water and shelter. At night, He built fires and cooked simple meals while Beatrice sat wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars emerge in patterns she had never bothered to learn in town. "That is the Great Bear," Garrett said, pointing out constellations. "And there the hunter. My father taught me these when I was young. He said a man who knows the stars is never truly lost." "What about women?" Beatrice asked. "Are we never truly lost if we know the stars?" He looked at her, his face half shadowed by firelight. "Everyone needs something to navigate by," he said. "Stars are as good as anything." On the second night, she asked him about his family, the parents who had died and left him and Rebecca alone. Garrett stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "My father was a trapper like me," he said finally. "My mother was from back east, came out here as a bride and never quite adjusted to frontier life. They loved each other, though. You could see it in how they were together, always finding excuses to touch, to be near each other." He smiled faintly. "My father used to say she was too good for him, that he tricked her into marrying him before she realized what a rough life she was signing up for." "How did they die?" Beatrice asked gently. "Fever," Garrett said. "It swept through our settlement, killed a dozen people in 2 weeks. My mother went first, then my father 3 days later. I think he did not want to be without her." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. "I was 16, thought I knew everything, thought I could handle anything. But I could not handle losing them, and I could not handle the responsibility of a 13-year-old sister. So I ran to the mountains and told myself I was doing it for us, to make money. Truth was, I was just running away from grief." "You were young," Beatrice said. "Younger than I am now. You cannot blame yourself for being overwhelmed." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I can blame myself for not going back sooner, for not checking on Rebecca more often. I sent money, thought that was enough, but money does not replace family." He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "That is why I could not walk away from you, because I have already walked away from someone who needed help, and I will not do it again." Beatrice moved closer to him, drawn by something she did not quite understand. "I am glad you did not walk away," she said quietly. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not been there that day." "You would have survived," Garrett said with certainty. "You are a survivor, Beatrice. You have been surviving for years. But surviving and living are different things, and you deserve the chance to do both." His words wrapped around her heart, warming places that had been cold for so long. She wanted to reach out and touch him, to feel the solid reality of his strength, but she held back, uncertain. They were not there yet, wherever there was. But she could feel something building between them, a connection that went deeper than gratitude or simple kindness. On the third day, they climbed higher into true mountains, following a trail that grew narrower and steeper with each mile. Ponderosa pines replaced the scrub vegetation of the lower elevations, their bark smelling of vanilla in the afternoon sun. Streams crossed the path, running clear and cold over smooth stones. "We are close," Garrett said as the sun began to dip toward the western horizon. "Another hour, maybe less." Beatrice could see the anticipation in the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes scanned the landscape with proprietorial familiarity. This was his place, his home, and he was bringing her into it. The thought made her nervous and excited in equal measure. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was larger than Beatrice had expected, built of thick logs chinked with mud and moss. A stone chimney rose from one end, and a wide porch wrapped around the front. Behind it, she could see a lean-to shelter for the horses and a small creek running through the trees. "This is it," Garrett said, and she heard pride in his voice. "My cabin. Your cabin too now if you want it." He dismounted and helped her down from Silver, his hand steady at her waist. Together they led the horses to the lean-to, where Garrett showed her how to unsaddle and brush them down. The physical work felt good after days of riding, and Beatrice found herself enjoying the simple task of caring for the gentle mare who had carried her so far. Inside, the cabin was spare but comfortable. A large fireplace dominated one wall with a table and chairs nearby. A kitchen area occupied one corner, shelves stocked with supplies. There were 2 doors leading off the main room, and Garrett pointed to each in turn. "My room and the spare room," he said. "The spare is yours. It has a bed, a chest for your things. Not fancy, but it is private and the roof does not leak." Beatrice looked around, taking in the solid construction, the way everything was built to last. There were small touches that spoke of the man who lived here. Books on a shelf, a rifle and bow mounted on the wall, a rocking chair by the fireplace that looked hand-carved. "It is wonderful," she said honestly. "Thank you for bringing me here." Garrett smiled, a real full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Welcome home, Beatrice." The word echoed in her chest. Home. She had not had a real home since her parents died. The boarding house had been shelter, nothing more. But this cabin, with its solid walls and mountain silence, felt like it could be more than that. They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Garrett woke early each day to check his trap lines or hunt, returning by midday with game or firewood or news of the surrounding wilderness. Beatrice learned to cook over the fireplace, experimenting with the supplies they had and the fresh meat Garrett provided. She cleaned and organized the cabin, finding satisfaction in creating order from the bachelor chaos that had accumulated during Garrett's years alone. Her hands continued to heal, the blisters fading to calluses and then to smooth skin. The swelling in her joints subsided, and the constant pain that had been her companion for so long gradually disappeared. She found herself able to use her fingers without thinking about it, to do delicate work without wincing. Garrett taught her skills she had never imagined learning. How to shoot a rifle, the kick of it against her shoulder and the satisfaction of hitting a target. How to gut and clean a fish pulled from the creek, the scales catching the light like coins. How to read animal tracks in the soft earth, distinguishing deer from elk, bear from mountain lion. How to move quietly through the forest, stepping on stones and logs instead of dry leaves. "You are a good student," he said one afternoon as she successfully tracked a rabbit to its warren. "Quick to learn, patient enough to practice." "I had a good teacher," Beatrice replied, and saw pleasure flash across his face. In the evenings they sat by the fire and talked. Garrett told her more stories of his years in the mountains, of close calls with weather and wildlife, of the profound peace he found in solitude. Beatrice spoke of her childhood before her parents died, of her mother's garden and her father's laugh, of dreams she had once had before survival became the only goal. "I wanted to learn to read music," she confessed one night. "My mother had a book of songs, and I used to imagine myself playing piano or singing in a proper parlor. Foolish dreams for a poor girl." "Not foolish," Garrett said. "Dreams are never foolish. They are what keep us human." "You have dreams?" she asked. He looked at her across the firelight, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "I am starting to," he said quietly. The air between them changed after that, charged with unspoken possibilities. Beatrice found herself hyper-aware of Garrett's presence, of the way his hair fell forward when he concentrated on some task, of the strength in his hands when he split wood or handled the horses. She caught him watching her sometimes, his blue eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her skin warm. They did not speak of it, this growing attraction, but it hummed beneath every interaction like a chord waiting to be resolved. One morning, Beatrice woke to find snow falling outside her window, the first real snow of the season. She dressed quickly and went to the main room where Garrett was already building up the fire. "Winter comes early up here," he said. "We might get a foot before it is done." "I have never seen snow like this," Beatrice admitted, moving to the window. The flakes were large and fat, drifting down in lazy spirals to blanket the clearing in white. "Come on," Garrett said, grabbing his coat. "I want to show you something." They ventured out into the falling snow, Beatrice bundled in the warm clothes Garrett had bought her in Albuquerque. He led her along the creek, upstream to where it widened into a small pool. The water steamed in the cold air, and when Beatrice crouched down to touch it, she gasped at the warmth. "Hot springs," Garrett explained. "They feed this part of the creek. In the deep of winter, this pool does not freeze. You can see elk and deer come here to drink when everything else is locked in ice." "It is beautiful," Beatrice breathed, watching the snow melt the instant it touched the water's surface. They stood together in the falling snow, and when Beatrice shivered, Garrett moved closer, sharing his warmth. "Are you happy here?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Happier than I have been in years, maybe happier than I have ever been." "Good." His voice was rough. "I want you to be happy, Beatrice. You deserve it." She turned to look up at him, at this mountain of a man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return, who had given her a home and taught her how to live instead of just survive. Snow dusted his hair and beard, melting on his warm skin, and his eyes were as blue as the sky beyond the clouds. "So do you," she said. "You deserve happiness too." Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his large hands. His touch was gentle, always so gentle, as though he feared his strength might hurt her. "I think you might be my happiness," he said quietly. "I did not plan it, did not think I deserved it after Rebecca. But you are here and you are alive, and every day I wake up glad that I found you." Beatrice's breath caught. "Garrett, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted. "I just wanted you to know. No expectations, no pressure. Just the truth." But Beatrice did not want to stay silent. She had spent too many years swallowing her words, making herself small, accepting less than she deserved. "I think you might be my happiness too," she said. "You saw me when I was invisible. You held my hands when they hurt and told me I deserved gentleness. You gave me a life I did not know I could have." "How could I not?" She stopped, the word too big and frightening to speak aloud yet, but Garrett heard it anyway. She could see it in the way his expression softened, in the way his thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Beatrice," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. He kissed her there in the falling snow, his lips warm despite the cold, his beard tickling her skin. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and when they pulled apart, Beatrice was smiling. "Come on," Garrett said, taking her hand. "Let us get you back inside before you freeze." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening, Garrett moved his chair closer to hers by the fire, and when Beatrice's head grew heavy, she let it rest on his shoulder. His arm came around her, solid and warm, and she felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Garrett courted her in his own rough way, bringing her wildflowers he found despite the snow, carving her small wooden figures during the long evenings, teaching her to dance to music only they could hear. He was careful with her always, checking that she was comfortable, that she wanted what was happening between them. And Beatrice, who had spent so long being afraid, found herself unafraid. She kissed him first sometimes, rose on her toes to press her lips to his, delighting in the way he would pull her close. She held his hand, traced the scars on his knuckles, learned the map of him as thoroughly as she was learning the mountains around them. "I love you," she told him one night as they sat by the fire. The words came easily, without fear. "I love you, Garrett Jameson." He kissed her forehead, her temples, her lips. "I love you too," he said against her mouth. "More than I knew I could love anyone." "What do we do now?" she asked. "Whatever we want," he said. "We could stay here, just the two of us. Or we could go down to the trading post, make a life there. Or we could travel, see what else the world has to offer. The choice is yours, Beatrice. I am yours. Wherever you want to go, I will follow." She thought about it, about the possibilities that stretched before her like the mountain vista. "I want to stay here," she decided. "At least for now. I want to learn more about this life, about the wilderness, about being with you. Maybe eventually we will want other things, but for now this is enough. More than enough." "Then we stay," Garrett agreed. "For as long as you want." Winter deepened around the cabin, locking them into their small corner of the world. Snow piled high outside, and the cold was fierce enough to freeze breath. But inside, Beatrice was warm. Garrett kept the fire burning, kept her fed and safe and loved. They passed the long dark evenings reading to each other, playing cards, simply talking about everything and nothing. And at night, Beatrice slept in Garrett's room, in his bed, held secure in his arms. He made love to her with the same gentleness he had shown her damaged hands that first night, as though she was precious beyond measure. And she learned the joy of being wanted not for what she could produce, but for who she was. Spring came slowly to the high country. The snow melted gradually, revealing the brown grass beneath, and then one day, green shoots began to push through the earth. The creek swelled with runoff, and Garrett took Beatrice fishing in the deeper pools, teaching her to read the water for where the trout lurked. "I have been thinking," he said one afternoon as they sat on the bank, their lines trailing in the current, "about us, about the future." "What about it?" Beatrice asked, watching her line bob in the water. "I want to marry you," Garrett said bluntly. "Properly, with vows and witnesses if you want them. I know we are already living as husband and wife in all the ways that matter, but I want it official. Want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours." Beatrice felt joy bubble up in her chest. "Yes," she said, turning to him with a grin. "Yes, of course I will marry you." "You did not even think about it," he said, but he was smiling too, that rare full smile that made him look younger. "I did not need to think about it," she replied. "I already know you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Why would I not want to marry you?" They made plans to travel down to the trading post at the valley's edge, where a circuit preacher sometimes came through. But first, Garrett wanted to show Beatrice something. He led her on a day-long ride deeper into the mountains, to a meadow high above the tree line where the grass grew thick and green and wildflowers painted the landscape in brilliant colors. "This is where I scattered Rebecca's ashes," he said quietly. "The family I left her with sent them to me after she died. I brought her here because it is the most beautiful place I know, and I thought she would like that." Beatrice slipped her hand into his, saying nothing, letting him have the moment. "I wanted you to see it," Garrett continued. "Wanted to bring you here before we get married so you know all of me, even the broken parts." "You are not broken," Beatrice said firmly. "You are healing. We both are." He looked down at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I love you," he said. "I need you to know that. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone." "I know," she said. "I love you too, always." They rode back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. That night, Garrett held her close, and Beatrice felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. A week later, they made the journey to the trading post. It was a small settlement, a dozen buildings clustered around a central store run by a formidable woman named Mrs. Catherine Fletcher. She greeted Garrett with obvious affection and looked at Beatrice with sharp, assessing eyes. "So you are the girl Garrett has been hiding in his cabin," she said. "Wondered when he would finally bring you around." "I am not hiding her," Garrett protested. "We have been busy." "I am sure you have," Mrs. Fletcher said dryly, but her eyes were kind. "Well, come in, come in. Let me look at you properly, girl." Beatrice found herself subjected to a thorough examination, Mrs. Fletcher asking rapid-fire questions about where she came from, how she met Garrett, what her plans were. Satisfied with whatever she found, the older woman nodded. "You will do," she pronounced. "Garrett needs someone with sense, and you look like you have some. Now, what brings you down from your mountain hideaway?" "We want to get married," Garrett said. "Is the preacher due through soon?" "Next week, if the weather holds," Mrs. Fletcher confirmed. "You planning to stay until then?" They were, and Mrs. Fletcher put them up in the small room above the store. Over the following days, Beatrice met the other residents of the trading post, found herself welcomed into this small community of mountain folk. They were a rough bunch, hardened by the frontier, but good-hearted beneath the calluses. The preacher arrived on schedule, a thin man with earnest eyes who performed the ceremony in the common room of the trading post with everyone in attendance. Beatrice wore a simple dress Mrs. Fletcher had produced from somewhere, and Garrett wore clean clothes with his hair tied back neatly. "Do you, Garrett Jameson, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher intoned. "I do," Garrett said, his deep voice steady and sure. "And do you, Beatrice Jordan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Beatrice said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Garrett did thoroughly, to the cheers and laughter of the assembled crowd. When he lifted his head, Beatrice saw everything she needed in his eyes. Love, devotion, a promise of forever. They celebrated that night with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible from such a small settlement. Mrs. Fletcher pulled Beatrice aside at one point, pressing a package into her hands. "Spices," she said, "and some fabric. A wedding gift. You take care of that man, you hear? He has been alone too long." "I will," Beatrice promised, "and thank you for everything." They stayed another week at the trading post before heading back to their cabin. On the journey home, Garrett stopped at the meadow where he had scattered his sister's ashes. Beatrice dismounted with him, and they stood together in the wildflowers. "I wish she could have met you," Garrett said. "She would have liked you." "I wish I could have met her too," Beatrice said, "but I think she would be happy that you found someone, that you are not alone anymore." "I hope so," Garrett said. He pulled Beatrice close, holding her in the mountain silence. "I hope she knows I did not forget her. That I try to do better now, to help when I can, to not walk away from people who need me." "She knows," Beatrice said with certainty. "Wherever she is, she knows." Back at the cabin, they settled into married life with easy comfort. Beatrice continued to learn mountain skills, becoming proficient with a rifle and bow, learning to tan hides and preserve meat. Garrett showed her how to forage for wild plants, which were edible and which were poison, how to make medicine from herbs and roots. Summer came in full, hot and bright, and they spent long days exploring the wilderness around their home. Garrett took Beatrice to hidden lakes where the water was so clear you could see straight to the bottom. They camped under the stars, making love on blankets spread over soft grass, the sky wheeling overhead in glorious patterns. "I never knew life could be like this," Beatrice said one night as they lay tangled together, sated and content. "Never knew I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Garrett admitted, stroking her hair. "I thought I had resigned myself to being alone, then you stumbled into my life and changed everything." "I did not stumble," she protested. "I collapsed very gracefully," he laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "My apologies." "You collapsed very gracefully, and I fell in love with you." Much better, she said, and kissed him. In the fall, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. The knowledge came gradually, through missed monthly courses and morning sickness and a strange new tenderness in her breasts. When she told Garrett, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, his face split in the widest grin she had ever seen. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," she confirmed, joy and terror warring in her chest. "Are you happy?" "Happy." He set her down carefully, as though she had suddenly become fragile. "Beatrice, I am more than happy. I am terrified and thrilled, and I cannot believe I get to do this with you." They prepared through the winter, Garrett becoming even more protective than usual. He insisted Beatrice rest more, take on fewer physical tasks, though she argued she was pregnant, not an invalid. But she allowed him to fuss because she knew it came from love, from the fear of losing someone else he cared about. Mrs. Fletcher came to stay at the cabin 2 weeks before the baby was due, determined to be there for the birth. "You cannot have a baby alone up here in the mountains," she declared. "What if something goes wrong? You need someone who has seen this before." The labor, when it came, was long and difficult. Beatrice had never known pain like this, waves of it that seemed to tear her apart. But Garrett held her hand through all of it, letting her squeeze until his bones creaked, whispering encouragement and love even when she cursed him for putting her in this position. "I know," he said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I am terrible. You can hate me all you want, just keep breathing. You are doing so well." Finally, after hours that felt like days, their son was born. He came into the world squalling, red-faced and perfect, and when Mrs. Fletcher placed him on Beatrice's chest, she felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. "A boy," Garrett said, his voice choked with emotion. He reached out to touch their son's tiny hand, his massive finger engulfed by the baby's grip. "He is perfect. You are perfect." They named him Gabriel, and he became the center of their world. Beatrice marveled at how someone so small could create such huge joy, such profound terror. Every milestone felt monumental. His first smile, his first laugh, the day he learned to roll over on the blanket they spread for him in the sun. Garrett was a devoted father, patient and gentle despite his size and rough appearance. Beatrice would often find him talking to Gabriel in a low rumble, explaining the world as though the baby could understand. "That is a pine tree, son, and that is a squirrel. See how he stores nuts for winter. That is what we call planning ahead." When Gabriel was 6 months old, they made the journey down to the trading post so everyone could meet him. The settlement had grown since their wedding, a few more families settling in the valley, drawn by the promise of land and freedom. Mrs. Fletcher doted on the baby, as did everyone else, passing him around like a precious treasure. "He has your eyes," Mrs. Fletcher told Garrett. "Poor child." "He has his mother's temperament, thank God," Garrett replied. "Can you imagine 2 of me?" Life continued in this rhythm for years. Gabriel grew from baby to toddler to young boy, learning to walk and talk and explore the wilderness around him. Garrett taught him to track and hunt, to respect the land and the animals that shared it. Beatrice taught him to read from the books they had, to appreciate beauty, to be kind. When Gabriel was 4, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time, labor was shorter, and their daughter arrived just as spring was breaking. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew in the meadow where Garrett had brought Beatrice that first spring. 2 children made the cabin feel full in the best way. Gabriel was protective of his little sister from the start, always making sure she had her favorite toy, alerting Beatrice when Rose cried. Rose, for her part, adored her big brother, following him everywhere on unsteady legs. "We made these people," Garrett said one night as they watched their children sleep. "I still cannot believe it sometimes, that we made them and they are here and they are ours." "Best thing we ever did," Beatrice agreed, leaning into his side. "Second best," he corrected. "Best thing I ever did was pick you up off that street in Albuquerque. I thought the best thing was when I agreed to marry you." "That too," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I have a long list of best things, and you are involved in all of them." When Gabriel was 10 and Rose was 6, they made a trip back to Albuquerque. Beatrice had not been there since the day they left, and she was curious to see how the town had changed. It had grown considerably, more buildings and more people, expanding into the desert. They walked past Henderson's textile shop, and Beatrice felt nothing but pity for the bent figure she could see through the window, still spinning. Mrs. Chen had passed away, she learned from a shopkeeper, and Henderson himself was old now, his hands shaking with palsy. "You ever regret leaving?" Garrett asked as they walked through the town square, Gabriel and Rose darting between the market stalls. "Never," Beatrice said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This town took everything from me and gave nothing back. You gave me a life. You gave me love. How could I regret that?" That night they stayed at a hotel, a small luxury after years of cabin living. The children were thrilled by the novelty of it, jumping on the beds and exploring every corner. Later, after Gabriel and Rose were asleep in their own room, Garrett pulled Beatrice close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes that day. For trusting me enough to come to the mountains. For building this life with me." He took her hands, the same hands he had tended so carefully years ago. They were calloused now from work, but it was different work, done on her own terms, at her own pace. "These hands deserved gentleness, and I am glad I could give it to them." "You gave me more than gentleness," Beatrice said, tears pricking her eyes. "You gave me everything." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness that had defined their years together. Proof that what they had built was not just survival but real, deep, abiding love. When Gabriel was 14, he started talking about wanting to explore beyond the mountains, to see the wider world. Beatrice saw the same wanderlust in him that had driven his father in younger years, and it frightened her. But Garrett, to her surprise, was calm. "Let him go when he is ready," he said. "He will come back. This is his home and we are his family, but he needs to find that out for himself the same way I did." "What if something happens to him?" Beatrice asked, old fears rising. "What if he gets hurt or lost, or then we will find him," Garrett said firmly. "But we cannot lock him away, Beatrice. We can only teach him everything we know and trust that it will be enough." Rose, meanwhile, showed an aptitude for medicine. She learned every herb and plant Garrett and Beatrice could teach her, and she would practice bandaging imaginary wounds on her patient father. "I want to help people," she declared at 8 years old. "Like you helped Mother." When Rose was 12, a traveling doctor passed through the trading post and agreed to take her as an apprentice. It broke Beatrice's heart to let her daughter go, but Rose was determined, and the doctor, an older woman named Sarah Winters, promised to treat her well. "She has real talent, doctor," Winters said. "I can teach her properly, send her to school eventually if she wants. She could have a real future as a physician." So Rose left, returning to the cabin for visits but spending most of her time learning medicine. Gabriel, true to Garrett's prediction, spent 2 years traveling throughout the West before returning home, older and wiser and still convinced there was nowhere better than the mountains. The years passed, marked by seasons and milestones. Beatrice's hair developed streaks of silver, and Garrett's beard went completely white, though he was still as strong as ever. They watched their children grow into adults, Gabriel bringing home a wife from the trading post, Rose eventually hanging out her own shingle as Dr. Rose Jameson. Grandchildren followed, filling the cabin with noise and laughter all over again. Beatrice taught them to read and to appreciate the small beauties of life. Garrett taught them to respect the wilderness and to be strong but gentle. Together, they passed on the lessons they had learned, the hard-won wisdom of two people who had found each other when both were lost. One evening, many years after that day in Albuquerque, Beatrice and Garrett sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. They were old now, their bodies worn by time and hard living, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had grown deeper, richer, burnished by decades of shared joys and sorrows. "You remember the day we met?" Beatrice asked, her hand in Garrett's. "Every detail," he said. "You were burning with fever, your hands were bleeding, and you were still trying to insist you did not need help. I was stubborn. You were scared," he corrected. "You thought you had to do everything alone because there was no one to help you, but there was someone. There was me." "There was you," she agreed. "My mountain man who held my hands and told me they deserved gentleness." "They did deserve it," Garrett said. "You deserved it. You deserved everything I could give you and more." "You gave me enough," Beatrice said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You gave me more than I ever dreamed of having. A home, a family, a life of love instead of just survival. You gave me everything that mattered." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. The same stars Garrett had pointed out to her on their journey to the cabin all those years ago. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnessing their love, and somewhere in the cabin behind them, they could hear their grandchildren's laughter. "I love you," Garrett said, as he had said countless times over the years. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Beatrice replied, "always and forever." The sun set completely, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and they continued to sit together, two people who had found in each other everything they needed. They had survived hardship and built something beautiful from the ruins. They had loved and been loved in return, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had started that way. It was a story of steady devotion, of two damaged people choosing every day to heal together. It was a story of hands held gently, of care given freely, of love that grew deeper with time. As the years continued to pass, as they grew older together in their mountain home, Beatrice never forgot where she had come from. The girl with bleeding fingers who thought survival was the best she could hope for. And she never took for granted the man who had seen her suffering and decided to do something about it, who had given her not just rescue but a real life, a real love. On warm summer days, Beatrice would sometimes look at her hands, at the calluses earned from good work done on her own terms, and remember what Garrett had said that first night in her boarding house room. These hands deserved gentleness. She had deserved gentleness, had deserved love and care and a chance at happiness. And Garrett had given her all of that and more. He had given her the mountains, the cabin, the family they had built. He had given her his strength when she had none left, his gentleness when the world had been harsh, his love when she thought she would never be loved again. In return, she had given him her trust, her heart, her life. She had helped him heal from the guilt of his sister's death, shown him that he could care for someone without failing them. Together, they had made something beautiful, something that would outlast them both in the form of their children and grandchildren, carrying forward the legacy of their love. Years later, when both were very old, Beatrice and Garrett still sat together on their porch most evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset. Their fingers were bent with age now, but they fit together perfectly, Garrett's hands still large and strong around Beatrice's smaller ones. "No regrets," Garrett would ask sometimes, a question that had become a ritual between them. Not a single one, Beatrice would always reply. You. Only that I did not find you sooner, he would say, that we did not have even more years together. But the years they did have were enough. They were filled with love and laughter, hard work and simple joys, the kind of happiness that comes from building something lasting with someone you love. They grew old together in their mountain home, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that they had found what so many people search their whole lives for and never find. When Garrett finally passed, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Beatrice mourned him deeply but not hopelessly. She knew they had been blessed with decades together, with a love that most people only dreamed of. She knew he had died content, surrounded by the family they had built, in the home he had created. She lived for 3 more years after his death, cared for by Gabriel and his family, visited frequently by Rose and her children. She spent her final years telling stories of her mountain man, of how he had saved her and how they had saved each other, creating a life neither had thought possible. When Beatrice Jordan Jameson died at 77, her children buried her beside Garrett on a hillside overlooking their cabin, with a view of the mountains that had been their home. Her last words were his name, spoken with love, and those who were there said she went with a smile on her face. The cabin remained in the family for generations, a testament to the love that had built it. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would return to it over the years, sitting on the porch where Beatrice and Garrett had sat, looking out at the same mountain vista, feeling the presence of those who had come before. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was right, people swore they could hear laughter in the trees, could feel the warmth of a love that had never truly died. The story of the spinner and the mountain man became legend in the family, passed down through the years as an example of what love could be when built on gentleness, respect, and devotion. The tale of 2 people who had been broken by life, who had found each other in a moment of need, and who had spent the rest of their days proving that love, real love, could heal anything. That gentleness was not weakness but strength. That care given freely was the greatest gift anyone could offer. Beatrice's hands, which had once bled from endless work, had been held gently by a mountain man who saw her worth when no one else did. And from that simple act of kindness had grown a love story that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a testament to the power of seeing someone truly and choosing to care. In the end, their story was not about grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had included both. It was about the choice to be gentle with each other, day after day, year after year. About building a life together through hard work and dedication and unwavering love. About 2 people who deserved happiness, and who found it in each other in a small cabin in the mountains, far from the dusty streets of Albuquerque where their story had begun. And if you climbed high enough into those mountains, to the meadow where wildflowers bloomed and the view stretched forever, you might still feel them there. Garrett and Beatrice Jameson, forever young, forever in love, forever home in the mountains they had made their own. Their love story complete, their ending happy, their legacy living on in the generations that followed. A testament to the transformative power of gentleness, of seeing someone's pain and choosing to ease it, of building a life together one day at a time until those days add up to forever.